Welcome to Body Buddies, home of the Power Foods lifestyle. Take it one meal, one workout, one day at a time. And now, here's the founder of Body Buddies, Kristy Jo.
Hello, Body Buddies. Welcome to another podcast episode where we are talking strategic nutrition, fitness, and mindset. Power your body, one meal, one workout, one day at a time. If you have not yet read my book, The Power Foods Lifestyle, that is the best starting point because my theories on the psychological and physiological connection, as well as strategy of putting all of the science out there together into some basic principles that help you stabilize blood sugar, increase energy, manage pain, chronic conditions, diseases, prevent those future conditions. It's powerful, and I want you to experience it. So head over to powerfoodslifestyle.com, get yourself a copy of the book, and I look forward to having you inside our private Facebook group, Power Foods Lifestyle Champions. If you're not yet a member, please go and add yourself or request to join. And as the sole admin of the group, I will personally accept you in. So go ahead and while you're at it, add me as a personal friend on Facebook. I would love it. Okay, today I'm super excited to talk about this gluten-free topic because this is the first time on the podcast we've really gotten deep into it. So I'm super excited to have Celeste Noland, who is a big-time blogger, here with me. And so I'll be talking with her, asking her questions about her adaptation for her family. So here's what you should know about her. She is married to an amazing guy with multiple food allergies and is also a full-time mom to 4 equally amazing kids. She's the owner, content creator, and photographer of the gluten-free blog Life After Wheat and loves the ocean, going on vacations, baking, cooking, eating out, and everything chocolate. She is always finding new hobbies to pick up and develop and loves sharing what she learns along the way. Celeste and her family have been eating gluten-free now for almost 5 years, and they have learned a lot. She loves sharing everything she and her husband have learned about creating a healthy gluten-free lifestyle, how to make incredible foods that are also gluten, soy, and oat-free, and the best tasting gluten-free products and brands. So I'm excited to share with you our discussion and give you some insight into how to go gluten-free and that there is, in fact, life after wheat. And here she is, Celeste Noland. Well, we are talking today because you are super passionate about helping people go gluten-free. And you have quite the story of why that is. Will you share with us just a little bit about how you became this passionate about teaching people?
I would love to share. Yes, I am very passionate about it. And it started about 5 years ago when my husband was diagnosed pretty much out of the blue with multiple food allergies. And one of those is gluten. He's also allergic to soy and oats as well. But at the beginning, he went to the doctor's office, found out that he had food allergies, and they sent him home. And when he came home, we were so confused as to what we should do, and it was just difficult. And I remember roaming the aisles of the stores that very day and just trying to figure out what it was that he could eat. And it was a learning process, the learning how to shop and how to bake and just how to go to other people's houses or go out to eat. It was all just a huge learning curve. So I do love sharing what we've learned with other people just to help other people maybe navigate that a little bit more smoothly than we were able to.
Yeah, and that's the most difficult thing because there are so many people these days who do need to go gluten-free. I think there's a lot of the cases of autoimmune diseases for the most part. Mm-hmm. Your husband, had food allergies, sensitivities. How did he even come to know those? You said it was a test?
Yes. He actually has esophagus closed up over the course of just a month or two. And so he went in and they thought that the culprit might be food allergies. And so he went and had some allergy testing done. And that's when we found out the results.
Is there a certain type of test people should ask for if they've had any sort of inclination that something's off? How would they know to get that test?
You know, it really is just a case-by-case basis,
Mm.
and I always recommend that people go to the doctor if they have concerns before they start a special diet, especially because if you have something like celiac disease and go off of gluten, they actually cannot test you accurately after that.
Oh, interesting.
And so it's better to do it before, otherwise you'll have to go back onto gluten for several weeks for it to be able to show up accurately on the test. So he had the skin test done. There are also blood tests, and it's often a good idea to get both to make sure that they match up correctly and give you a good idea of what's going on with you.
Okay, so that's really good information to know. For a lot of our listeners who maybe don't know what gluten is, will you explain what it is and maybe anything you know just about the actual, it's a protein, right?
Uh-huh. It is a protein. It is found in wheat and barley and rye. And those things can be kind of sneaky and hide in a lot of the foods, especially because in the United States, the companies are required to label wheat because it's one of the top 8 allergens, but gluten is not considered one of the top 8 allergens. And so barley and rye can actually sneak into a lot of things without being labeled clearly. It's just important to learn how to read the labels and look for those things.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too because a lot of times there's promotions like a gluten-free event. For instance, I did an expo at a gluten-free event last year in Salt Lake City. And so a lot of people come, and it seems like overall those people who did need to go gluten-free knew a ton when they would stop by and talk to me. It was their families that they had almost no idea. So, I mean, you don't need to go gluten-free, right?
Right.
But do you in order to support your husband, or how does that work? Let's just talk about the social support system. How has that been for your family to adjust to one person needing to eat a certain way?
Well, it has a huge impact in so many more ways than you would even think if you don't go through it yourself. It's just my husband that has the food allergies, but it does affect all of us because when we go out to eat, there's only so many places that he can go. And so we have to do things to figure that out. There's also family parties, friend get-togethers, different social events like that, food is such a huge part of our lives and the connections that we make, that it does affect everybody that way. And there's things that you can do to overcome that and work around it and still enjoy life just the same as when you could eat gluten and anything else that you wanted. We have rearranged our kitchen a little bit.
Tell us about that.
So me and the kids, we eat wheat still, but we have a dedicated wheat area in the house, and then we also have a dedicated area on the other side of the kitchen that is gluten-free. So he has his own cupboard, he has his own toaster, he has his own products that the kids can't reach their hands into when they have some kind of wheat on their hands. So we just work around it like that, and our dinners are always completely gluten-free so that we can sit down and have a nice family meal together where everybody enjoys the same food.
See, and that's probably a huge thing that our listeners need to realize is respecting that social environment and realizing there will be a change if one person in the family does need to cater to a certain need to go gluten-free. Now you're talking about even if the kids reach their hand in, so we know that when it comes to gluten, any speck whatsoever, that cross-contamination, it could be as impactful as them having a ton of gluten, right? And that's why we have to be super careful.
Yes, it really can. They say that people with celiac disease, as little as 1/8 of a teaspoon of gluten can send them into a full-blown reaction, which for some people can last weeks. So it really is something that you have to be careful with. It's known as cross-contamination, where they might not be eating gluten, but if they have a salad that once had croutons on it, or if they have a gluten-free cereal and somebody has had a slice of bread before and still has crumbs on their hands and then reaches their hand into the cereal box. Yes, it is very tricky. So that's why we kind of keep things separated, especially where we have kids in our house, because it just makes it so much easier for him to know that he has safe food and doesn't have to worry about that.
So that's a big one to all of our listeners, starting to separate those areas of the kitchen, it sounds like. Now, do you have any ideas for how people can maybe start to cook a little bit differently? What are some of those top tips you have about, do people have to change everything?
No, not necessarily everything. It's just a matter of figuring out how it works, and it does take practice. There's a lot of great resources online, and I share a few on my blog.
I was going to say, like your blog, tell us the URL again.
It is thereislifeafterwheat.com. So I do have some baking tips on there. The biggest thing that you have to remember is that gluten is a binding agent. And so when you take gluten out of the picture and use rice flours or different kinds of flours like that, your baked goods will just basically crumble and fall apart. So you do have to add something. The one that is most common is called xanthan gum, and most people can tolerate that just fine, and it is gluten-free, and that just helps your baked goods stick together and not fall apart, just like regular gluten goods.
Yeah, now that's probably a product or an ingredient. A lot of people don't know what on earth that is. Where would they even find that?
You know, you can find it at health food stores, but you can also find it on most grocery store shelves. It's just in the baking section. Bob's Red Mill is one of the most common brands, and it just comes in a little package. It seems like it's really expensive, but you don't use very much at all, and so that little package will last you 6 months to a year probably.
Perfect. Are there any other products like that, little tricks to the trade that you need to have stocked up in your house?
I've learned that vinegar is one of those things. It's not something most people think of, but it really does help the texture of baked goods. So when I'm converting a recipe, that's usually something that I do, is I add a little bit of either apple cider vinegar or just plain vinegar, just make sure that it is labeled gluten-free.
Wow, that's a really good tip. So I'm really curious. I want to go back to this cross-contamination thing. Tell us about oats, because what I've heard is some oats can be cross-contaminated and some are gluten-free. What has been your experience with oats? Because that's kind of a tricky back and forth one I've heard.
The oats is tricky, and it depends on where you go for the information. Basically, as a bottom line, you'll want to make sure that any oats that you eat when you are gluten-free are certified gluten-free oats, because oats are often grown in the same fields as wheat. And so that's where the cross-contamination comes in. Oats are gluten-free. It's just that they're often cross-contaminated during the growing process.
That makes sense. Let's kind of go through just the basic foods that have gluten in them that people are regularly eating. Why don't we go through just any food that comes to mind?
Sure, there's tons. One of the main ones is just bread products and cereal products. Wheat is in most of those, unless if you find one that's labeled gluten-free. Another one is sauces and gravies and those kinds of things, because wheat will be used as a thickening agent in wheat flour usually. So that's a big one. Another one that's less common and kind of tricky is dressings, marinades, and some sauces like soy sauce.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
While those might not contain wheat, they often contain soy or barley. So that's a big one to watch for.
So people need to be careful of, let's go through the little checklist: wheat, barley, rye, right? And then what else? Is there any others that?
Just wheat, barley, and rye.
Okay, so those three. So there's a lot of other grains that are gluten-free that we should eat or can eat. So what do you kind of keep stocked around your home that are still carbohydrate based?
Sure. We love lots of different grains. Rice is a good one, but we try to not be too excessive with that, just because it's not the healthiest grain, and staying healthy while you're gluten-free is a really important thing. So we do eat quinoa. Quinoa is a big grain for us. As far as baking goes, we also like to use sorghum flour, which is a great substitute for whole wheat flour. It has a comparable nutrition profile. And also buckwheat flour. That one's a little bit more tricky.
Because it sounds like wheat.
Yes, it does sound like wheat, but it is actually not even related to wheat. And
What
it's
is buckwheat?
Kind of flour. To be honest with you, I don't know.
Let's Google that later.
Yes.
Okay, all of our listeners, find out what buckwheat is. Let us know, okay?
I believe it's a pseudo grain similar to quinoa.
Okay.
But I would have to look it up again to make sure.
Yeah. Well, and now that we're talking about all these grains, I had one come to mind that a lot of people don't realize is wheat-based, and that's couscous.
Uh-huh.
So we have to watch out for that one. What are some of those others that, especially like, I teach power foods, and so I have a list, and some of them are gluten-free, some of them aren't. I'm glad you mentioned the rice. Beans are gluten-free, right? Mm-hmm. What else? What are the yams, sweet potatoes, red potatoes? These are all gluten-free, guys. What else? What other good foods naturally don't have gluten in them?
Pretty much all,
quinoa.
Yeah, fruits and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
So when we go grocery shopping, we usually fill the cart up first in the produce section because everybody can eat those.
Yay!
So that's a good one. Another one of our favorites are beans and lentils.
Lentils. A lot of people don't know what lentils are. How sad is that?
It is sad. We actually have a few different varieties of lentil-based pasta in our pantry, and we love the lentil-based pasta. It is very nutritious, so everybody can eat it in the family, and we feel good about it.
Yeah.
And it tastes great and is gluten-free.
Yeah, I remember learning about lentils about 7 years ago, and I had never known what they were growing up. So guys, if you don't know what lentils are, they're just these little bean-like things. It's in the legume family, and they come in the varieties of red, green. They're regular colors like a tan. But so when you're talking about lentil-based pasta, so you're saying they basically grind those up to make the base for this pasta?
Yeah, there's some varieties. One that's sold by Tolerant Foods, which is a favorite of ours. If you go buy it at a large warehouse type store like Costco or Sam's Club, then it ends up being pretty cheap. And it's just lentils, which is incredible.
That sounds so good.
They taste really good.
Huh. And I like lentils because they're less impactful on blood sugar, and where carbohydrates we know are the macronutrient that raise that. And when we're trying to really, especially if we're on a fat loss journey or if we're trying to decrease inflammation in our body, that's a really important thing, which I'm going to go back to this experience with the Gluten-Free Expo with you, because I want to ask you a question about healthy gluten-free foods and not so healthy gluten-free foods, because what I observed was there were a lot of booths of treats and yummies and pastries and candies, and it's all gluten-free. And I sensed this generalized feeling that, oh, because it's gluten-free, we can eat it. Have you observed that in some of the gluten-free trends? Or maybe the better question is, what are your thoughts on choosing wise, healthy foods that are gluten-free versus just anything?
You know, that is a tough one, because a lot of people will assume because it's labeled gluten-free that it is healthy. And that actually is very far from the truth, because we quickly learned when we started our gluten-free journey that most of the gluten-free foods out there aren't healthy, and it becomes a real problem when you are completely changing the way you eat and you're not getting the nutrients you need and you weren't feeling well to begin with. So when you're starting a gluten-free journey, it really is important to make sure that your body is getting the nutrients it needs so it can heal and you can start to feel better. And that's one thing that you need to watch for. It's great to have treats that taste like you remember them tasting, and that is an important part of your gluten-free journey as well.
Yeah.
But it is very important to search out things that have whole grains, that aren't just full of starch, that maybe have a little less sugar and things like that. And there are getting to be so many more options like that on the market that makes it really helpful.
And that's such a good piece of advice, and something I see in a lot of my coaching is if we just think solely about our macronutrient groups, we have our protein, we have our fats, and we have our carbohydrates. I'd say the greatest majority of our food products that have gluten in them are in that carbohydrate category, right? So that doesn't change the fact that we still need to be choosing healthy proteins. We still need to be getting healthy fats. It's simply when it comes time to use those carbohydrates, we simply choose a gluten-free carbohydrate product, or, food that naturally doesn't have gluten in it. So I've observed that, and I see people do very well when they still have a strategy of eating. It's just simply when they have carbs, it's going to be a gluten-free carb, and it can get pretty simple. Let me ask you about, let's go back to this flour thing, because I'm fascinated to hear some names that I haven't really played around with. So give us an overview of maybe a lot of the different types of flours that can be used, what your favorites are, and if there's any types of recipes that a certain flour works really well with.
Sure. You know, the great thing about this question is I actually just published a blog post that has my top gluten-free store-bought flours and all the recipes on my blog that work with each one.
Awesome.
So that's a great resource. But just to go over it real quick, one of my favorite healthy gluten-free flours is one called Tree Street Grains. You can find it on Vivian's Live Again website. She's just starting to sell that flour. And it is a completely whole grain flour that has no added starch, which is one of a kind in the gluten-free world.
Wow.
And we use it in pancakes. We've used it in cornbread and a few other things. We're still experimenting, but that's a great healthy option. And then of course there are so many that you can just kind of throw together, like the sorghum and the buckwheat. Almond flour is also a great option. It makes really good baked goods, and you can add it in. Once you get comfortable with cooking gluten-free, you can kind of get a feel for it and just throw in a few different ones. But there's lots of great flour mix recipes out there too. And then of course the store-bought options.
Tell us about your most epic fail trying to cook gluten-free.
Oh geez, there's a few of them. One of the ones that we talk about rather often and laugh about is the first time that I tried to make gluten-free rolls. And I remember just being so proud of myself that I was going to make gluten-free rolls, and they turned out like hockey pucks. Literally, they were just inedible. And I've talked to a lot of people that have had that same experience, because making yeast breads that are gluten-free is so much different.
Wow, I can't imagine how hard that is. I've
Yeah.
never tried. I don't know if I will.
You know, it's easy if you know the right tricks.
Okay.
You just have to know what you're getting into.
If I ever have to go gluten-free, I mean, I actually eat pretty naturally gluten-free because I'm choosing just natural gluten-free carbs. But anyway, if the time ever comes, I'm coming straight to you and saying, help me make this bread.
Oh, we will make it. It's actually a lot quicker and easier to make than gluten bread.
Really? Why is that?
Because you don't have to let the dough rise twice.
Oh.
You just allow it to rise once, and it's more of a batter than it is a dough. So there's no kneading involved. You just mix it up for a good 5 minutes.
Oh,
spread it into your pan, let it rise, and it will be done in an hour.
Oh, that sounds great. I remember growing up being taught how to make bread and kneading that bread and having to slam it on the counter and mash it over. And oh my gosh, you have the oil all over. It was messy business. And then the bread dough would stick to the hair on my knuckles.
Oh, yes.
And I currently don't have hair on my knuckles because I'm weird and shave them off. But but I remember that, and it took so long to get that bread dough. Oh my goodness, so good memories, but haven't made bread in a while.
Yep.
Any other, let's maybe go the opposite direction. So not a failure. Now tell us about your most successful gluten-free baking experience that you were just so on top of the world with.
Well, I think that would have to be my crescent roll recipe. And it goes along those same lines.
Is this on your blog?
It is on my blog.
Ooh,
yes.
What's the title? People can go look at it.
Just gluten-free crescent rolls.
Oh.
So it is, and it's very easy to make. Like I said, it's a little bit different than making traditional ones, but they turn out fantastic. And I remember how happy I was when that recipe finally turned out, because you can see where it began with the hockey pucks, and we just kept making tweaks and figured out how to do it. And it's a great recipe. We've made chicken roll-ups with it. I took a spin on that one and turned it into breadsticks, which are fantastic and soft and delicious. And so it's a very versatile recipe that can even be made into cinnamon rolls and things like that.
Okay, I've got to go check out this recipe. So I heard something in this last little bit of you saying it where you made a lot of tweaks. So there's a little bit of psychology here. of realizing if you have to make these changes, is it going to be just totally without any bumps in the road? What advice would you have for people on a psychological level, an emotional level of how to maybe accept that you're not going to be perfect at the transition?
You know, that is a hard one when you're just starting out and the first time you try making something and maybe it doesn't turn out like you remember food tasting. And just to realize that it is going to be a little bit of a journey, but you will get there. You really will. And to just keep getting back in the kitchen, keep trying different products, keep trying different techniques. There's lots of bloggers like myself that are more than happy to answer your questions if you just reach out to us on our blog posts or via social media. I'm here to help people. That's what I love to do. And so I'm always available if people reach out to me.
That's so great. Such a wonderful resource. So drop your URL one more time, and then we're going to talk about a special little free gift we have for everybody.
Yes, and I'm excited about that. My website is just thereislifeafterwheat.com.
Such a great title.
Thanks.
Where did did you just wake up in the middle of the night and think, that's it? There it is. That's what I need to do. Or how did it come to you?
You know, it honestly was the first time that I made something that tasted good. Gluten-free.
There's life.
There is. And I turned to my husband and I said, there is life after wheat. We have managed to figure this out, and life was good because there was a hard period at the beginning where we struggled finding things that were good to eat. And as I was saying earlier, it just really affects all areas of life. And when you can have food that truly tastes good and is nourishing to you, then it is very rewarding. And I want everybody to be able to experience that.
Wonderful hope, especially those who are listening to this probably are saying, I either just found out I need to go gluten-free, or I'm in the journey right now and need some inspiration, motivation to keep going. So definitely head over to Celeste's blog. You're going to learn so much. Let's go ahead and tell them about this free gift we have. You can go get it at powerfoodslifestyle.com/GF. That stands for gluten-free, in case you couldn't figure that one out. So I'm giving 50, that's 50, yes, you heard me right, of my gluten-free recipes that are going to be balanced with your protein, your carb, your fats. And then Celeste has put together something really neat for us. Tell us what this is.
I put together just a list of our top 10 things that we learned at the beginning and throughout our gluten-free journey. And that's, like I was saying earlier, just what I want to share with people, a few baking tips and things like that, but also just what you need to know to keep going and not lose hope.
It's a wonderful, wonderful document. So you guys are going to love that. Go grab that for free. We're so happy to have shared this information with you. One more time, that's powerfoodslifestyle.com/GF. So one last parting piece of advice, Celeste, what would that be?
Just keep going. Keep going. Keep trying different things. Take charge of your gluten-free life and make it a good one.
Awesome. Let's remember that, everybody. And at the end of the day, it's all about being your best self. When you power your body, you essentially can power your life. You get out of this feeling self-consumed, don't feel good, so that once you get feeling good and you can be confident in the energy and the way your brain is functioning, the way your body feels, you're not in pain anymore, that's when you can go out in your life and be of more value and service to other people. So it's worth it to power your body. Take it one meal, one workout, one day at a time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can learn more about Body Buddies and Power Foods Lifestyle by going to www.body-buddies.com, BODY-BUDDIES.com, and powerfoodslifestyle.com. That's www.POWERFOODS-lifestyle.com.
Information in this episode is provided for informational purposes and is not meant to substitute the advice provided by your own physician or other medical professional. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.